Hello. Depending on who you ask, India has had a problem with its federal structure for anywhere between 20 to 40 years, right? And the reason for that is that every resource allocation problem that this country has had has been skewed towards the Indo-Gangetic plains and away from southern India, right? And this has agitated many in southern India. Right, the most common complaint that you would see is in terms of the resource allocation when it comes to finance commissions, right? Like finance commission is the body which essentially devolves tax money back to states. And that devolution back to states in what is called the horizontal devolution has generally punished southern India for what is considered good progress in terms of controlling its population and has benefited in the sort of popular discourse, the Indo-Gangetic plains. And there's good reason for that because of the way in which population works, right? Now, firstly, is that true? The answer is generally true in that, if you were to sort of look at a regression chart between the state domestic product of each state versus the actual budget of each state, right? Like in an ideal world, that state, if it were not part of the Indian Union, should be able to sort of, have a budget that is commensurate with its actual GSDP, right? So states that are, if you draw a chart like this and a regression line through it, states that are below that line are generally funding sort of the states that are above that line, right? So states such as Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh generally fall above that line. States such as, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala fall below this line, and Haryana as well fall below this line, right? As does Maharashtra, just a little bit. And if you see there, the problem then really becomes, it's none of these states mentioned. It is that Uttar Pradesh is sort of an extreme outlier in that particular regression chart. And it almost, if you look at that chart with any closeness, you would come to the conclusion that everybody in India, it doesn't matter whether you're in southern India, western India, eastern India, central plains, wherever, everybody else is basically, working, paying taxes so that, that tax money goes to Uttar Pradesh. It sort of almost gives that impression, right? Now, is that true? And secondly, why is that the case, right? Now, if you look at that chart, it does seem to be a little bit true, right? Like most of our tax money that we send to the union, apart from what gets sent back to us, it seems to largely go to Uttar Pradesh. We do send some money to states like Rajasthan, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, but like nobody's going to sort of, have a problem with a little bit more money going to these states, given that they do need assistance. The problem that they will have is just the off-the-charts sort of, place that Uttar Pradesh has, because it's like about 3 times what Bihar has in terms of its distance from the regression line in terms of its positive residual, right? Why does this happen? And if we look at the allocation ratio and the formula that sort of goes into arriving at that allocation ratio, the answer becomes quite clear, which is that even though the allocation ratio has factors such as land area, population, income distance, demographic performance, so on and so forth, tax efficiency, so on and so forth, the problem is that all these factors are again scaled by population, right? So what happens is that if you have a state like Uttar Pradesh in India, which has a population upwards of 200 million, which is bigger than most countries, then what happens, and again, if you scale every single one of these unrelated to population factors by population, then what happens is, even though it is not the intent, the end result is that population ends up having an almost exponential effect. And when a state like Uttar Pradesh with above 200 million as population gets thrown into the mix, it just has an outlier effect, right? So it's just as simple as that. Now, a good counterexample to this would be states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand. All of these states were sort of carved out of existing states, right? And these are generally poor states. If we look at whether they are above or below the sort of regression line that we speak of, they don't sort of have this Uttar Pradesh effect. In fact, they have less of an effect than their quote-unquote parent state from which they were carved out of. What this means is that this population sort of, as the population of the state increases in either direction, it sort of, pushes the state up, upwards, right? Because that's the way in which that particular formula works. So the simplest answer to India's sort of biggest conundrum seems to be, well, as as a state's population approaches somewhere near 100 million, break the state up into two states of 50 million each, and you will magically solve this problem, right? At that point, what will happen is that we'll give a little bit more money to a state with 50 million of people, but not that much more, so that we give them some assistance, but not too much. And more importantly, states like Maharashtra, which again is a very large state and is a very wealthy state, a prosperous state, does not end up coughing up as much as, let's say, Gujarat or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or even Haryana. And the reason for that is Maharashtra, by virtue of its size, gets back a lot of that money. So, it'll have if we break up states which are above 100 million, we'll have, two things happen. One is states that are much above the regression line, such as Uttar Pradesh, will come closer down, and states which are very close to the regression line, despite being quite prosperous, such as Maharashtra, will sort of further fall down because they will be made to cough up a little more because they will not have the cushioning effect of their population, right? So the answer to India's sort of resource allocation problem, at least in the short run, seems to be, well, have a limited 100 million as population, and once the state hits that, break it up. So I know this is not something that's going to sell with politicians, but it's in that regression chart, this will work.